So, there I was at this fancy party, right? Everyone was having a great time sipping on cocktails and chatting away. My wife Sarah looked stunning in her red dress, mingling effortlessly with the crowd. But something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. Maybe it was the way she kept glancing at her phone or how she seemed unusually interested in one particular guy, Mark, a so-called friend of ours. As the night wore on, my suspicions grew. Sarah was being overly attentive to Mark, laughing a bit too hard at his jokes, touching his arm, whispering in his ear. It was subtle, but to me it screamed of something more than just friendly banter. I decided to keep a close eye on her without making it obvious. Then it happened. I was at the bar getting another drink when I saw Sarah slip something into my glass from the corner of my eye. My heart dropped. Was she drugging me? Why? To be alone with him? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't confront her there, not without proof or making a scene. So I took a deep breath and decided to play along. I pretended to sip my drink, making sure to only let the liquid touch my lips without swallowing any. Then I waited. The night continued, but I felt like an outsider in my own life, watching the deceit unfold. Mark and Sarah's interactions grew more blatant as the evening progressed. They thought I was too drunk to notice, but I saw everything. When Sarah thought I was sufficiently out of it, she whispered something to Mark, and they slipped away into a side room. I followed at a distance, my mind racing with anger and betrayal. They went into a small private lounge area, closing the door behind them. I waited a few minutes, then approached quietly. The door was in T fully shut, and I could hear their hushed voices inside. I peeked through the crack and saw them, too close for comfort. Mark S. hand on her waist, her fingers running through his hair. That was it. I couldn't let this slide. My mind was already crafting a plan for revenge. I had to be smart, precise, and ruthless. They thought I was incapacitated, but I was wide awake, fueled by rage and a need for justice. This was just the beginning. I left the party early, pretending to stumble out in a drunken haze. Sarah and Mark didn't even notice. I got into an Uber and headed home, my mind a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a cold, calculating resolve. By the time I reached our house, I had a plan. The next morning, Sarah acted like nothing happened. She greeted me with a sweet smile and asked how I was feeling. I played my part perfectly, feigning a headache and a foggy memory of the night before. She bought it completely. "Poor baby," she cooed, kissing me on the forehead. "You really had too much to drink. Maybe you should take it easy today." "Yeah, you're right," I mumbled, forcing a weak smile. "I'll just rest." As soon as she left for work, I got to work. I installed a couple of hidden cameras around the house, focusing on the living room and the bedroom. If Sarah and Mark were planning on sneaking around behind my back, I would catch them in the act. It wasn't just about proving her infidelity, it was about having leverage for what I had planned next. Over the next few days, I noticed a pattern. Sarah would come home late, claiming she had to work overtime or meet up with friends. Each time I pretended to believe her, acting like the oblivious husband she thought I was. But my cameras told a different story. Mark would come over shortly after she got home, and they'd spend hours together, talking, laughing, and doing things I couldn't bear to watch. I kept the recordings, meticulously organizing them on a secure hard drive. I made sure to have multiple copies just in case. The betrayal stung, but it also fueled my resolve. They were so comfortable, so sure they wouldn't get caught. That arrogance would be their downfall. One evening, I decided it was time to start phase 2 of my plan. I called my best friend Jack, who was a tech genius. He owed me a favor, and I knew he could help me with the next step. "Hey, Jack, I need your help with something," I said, my voice steady. "What is up?" he asked, sounding curious. "I need you to hack into my wife's phone. I have reasons to believe she is cheating on me, and I need to access her messages and calls." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Wow, man, are you sure about this?" "Absolutely. I've got proof, but I need more." "Can you do it?" Jack sighed. "All right, I'll help you, but you need to be careful. This could blow up in your face. Don't to worry, I've got it under control." The next day, Jack came over with his laptop and got to work. It didn't take long for him to gain access to Sarah's phone. As I read through her messages with Mark, the betrayal cut even deeper. They were planning to be together talking about how they'd de-manage if I found out. It was sickening, but it also gave me the final pieces of evidence I needed. Armed with the recordings and the messages, I was ready for the final phase. I planned a romantic weekend getaway for Sarah and me, acting like I wanted to reconnect. She was thrilled, completely oblivious to my true intentions. We drove out to a secluded cabin in the woods, far from prying eyes. That night, as we sat by the fire sipping wine, I made my move. "Sarah," I said softly, "I need to talk to you about something." She looked at me, her eyes filled with concern. "What is wrong, honey?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I know about you and Mark." Her face went pale, the wine glass slipping from her hand and shattering on the floor. "What are you talking about?" Dante. "Play dumb, Sarah. I've seen the videos, read the messages, I know everything." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The look of horror on her face was almost satisfying. "I'm not here to argue or fight," I continued, keeping my voice calm. "I am here to tell you that it is over. You're going to leave, Mark, and you're going to stay with me, and if you ever think about cheating on me again, I'll ruin both of you. I have all the evidence I need." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, her body trembling. "I'm so sorry, Alex. Please give me another chance." I shook my head, standing up. "This is your last chance, Sarah. Don't mess it up." I walked out of the cabin, leaving her to her guilt and fear. As I drove back home, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. This wasn't tea over, not by a long shot. But for now, I had the upper hand, and I intended to keep it. The next few days were a whirlwind of tension and deceit. Sarah tried her best to act like everything was normal, but I could see the fear and guilt in her eyes. She was walking on eggshells, unsure of what I would do next, and that is exactly how I wanted her to feel. I spent my time reinforcing my plan, making sure all the evidence was securely stored and easily accessible if needed. I also started to dig deeper into Mark S.'s life. If I was going to take him down, I needed to know everything about him, his habits, his weaknesses, his secrets. I was relentless, and soon I had a pretty clear picture of who he was outside of our social circle. Mark worked at a mid-sized tech firm, was recently divorced, and had a penchant for gambling. This was interesting. A little pressure in the right places could push him over the edge. I needed to be careful, though. This wasn't just about getting back at Sarah. It was about making sure neither of them ever dared to cross me again. One evening, I decided to pay Mark a visit. It was time to let him know that I was aware of everything. I found him at a bar, his usual haunt after work. He was sitting at the counter, nursing a drink, completely unaware of the storm about to hit him. "Hey, Mark," I said, sliding onto the stool next to him. He looked up, surprised, but not yet alarmed. "Alex, hey, what are you doing here?" I smiled, a cold, calculated smile. "Just thought we should have a little chat, man to man." He raised an eyebrow, clearly sensing something was off. "About what?" "About Sarah," I replied, watching his reaction closely. His face paled and he set his drink down slowly. "What about her?" "I know everything," I said calmly. "The affair, the lies, all of it, I have proof." Mark swallowed hard, glancing around as if looking for an escape. "Alex, I can explain." I cut him off. "I am not interested in your excuses, Mark. I am here to give you a warning. Stay away from my wife. If I find out you've been in contact with her again, I'll ruin you. I know about your gambling debts, your messy divorce. It would be a shame if all that became public knowledge, wouldn't it?" He stared at me, a mixture of fear and anger in his eyes. "You can do this. You have no right." "I have every right," I replied coolly. "You messed with my life, my marriage. Now you get to deal with the consequences. Consider this your only warning." I stood up, tossing some cash on the bar to cover his drink. "Stay away from Sarah, or I'll make sure you regret it." As I walked out of the bar, I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was just the beginning. Mark and Sarah thought they could betray me and get away with it. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Over the next few weeks, I ramped up the pressure. I made sure to be home more often, keeping a close eye on Sarah. She tried to act like everything was normal, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She was terrified, constantly looking over her shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I also started planting seeds of doubt in our social circle. Casual comments about Mark S. gambling, his shady dealings, little hints that made people start questioning his character. It wasn't long before the rumors started spreading and Mark found himself increasingly isolated. One evening, Sarah came to me, tears streaming down her face. "Alex, please, I can't take this anymore. I'm sorry for what I did, but you were destroying us." I looked at her, feeling a cold satisfaction. "You destroyed us, Sarah. I'm just making sure you understand the consequences of your actions." "Please," she sobbed. "I'll do anything. Just stop this. Let's try to fix our marriage." I studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, Sarah. I'll give you one last chance, but you need to prove to me that you are committed to making this work." "I will, I promise," she said, relief flooding her face. "What do you need me to do?" "For starters, you're going to cut all ties with Mark. No contact, no excuses, and you're going to be completely honest with me from now on. If I catch you lying or hiding something, we are done, understand?" She nodded vigorously. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes." "Good," I said, leaning back in my chair. "We'll see if you can keep that promise." As she walked away, I felt a sense of triumph. This was far from over. I had Sarah where I wanted her, and Mark was on the brink of collapse. But I wasn't done yet. There was still more to come. The weeks that followed were tense, but Sarah seemed to be making a genuine effort to salvage our marriage. She cut off all contact with Mark, stayed home more, and went out of her way to show me she was committed. I played the role of the forgiving husband, but deep down, my anger and resentment were brewing. Mark, on the other hand, was spiraling. The rumors I had spread about his gambling problems had taken root, and he was losing friends and credibility fast. I knew his breaking point was near, and I was ready to push him over the edge. One evening, while Sarah was out running errands, I made my move. I called Mark using a burner phone so he wouldn't recognize the number. "Hello," he answered, his voice wary. "It is Alex," I said, my tone icy. "We need to talk. Meet me at the old factory on Pine Street in an hour." "What? Why?" he stammered, panic evident in his voice. "Just be there," I replied curtly, hanging up before he could protest. An hour later, I stood in the shadows of the abandoned factory, waiting. Mark arrived, looking around nervously. When he saw me, he hesitated, but I motioned him over. "Alex? What is this?" he asked, his voice shaky. "I wanted to see how desperate you've become," I said, stepping closer. "You are on the brink, aren't you, Mark? Your gambling debts are piling up. Your reputation is in tatters. It is only a matter of time before you hit rock bottom." He glared at me, trying to muster some semblance of defiance. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to leave town," I said simply. "Disappear. Start fresh somewhere else. If you stay, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are." He looked at me, eyes wide with desperation. "You can't do this. I have a life here. A job." "You had a life," I corrected. "Now you have nothing. Leave, and I want to ruin you completely." Mark was silent for a moment, then he nodded slowly. "Fine, I'll go." "Good," I said, stepping back. "And remember, if you ever come near Sarah or me again, I'll destroy you." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Mark to contemplate his shattered life. I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. One piece of the puzzle was out of the way. Now I needed to deal with Sarah. When I got home, Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner. She smiled when she saw me, but I could see the apprehension in her eyes. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Fine," I replied, kissing her on the cheek. "I've been thinking, Sarah, we need to talk." Her smile faltered and she turned off the stove, giving me her full attention. "Okay, what else on your mind? I want us to go to marriage counseling," I said, watching her reaction closely. "We need to rebuild the trust that was broken." She nodded eagerly. "Yes, of course. I think that's a great idea. I've already found a therapist," I continued. "We'll start next week." "Thank you, Alex," she said softly. "I really want to make this work." "I know," I said, forcing a smile. "We'll get through this together." Over the next few weeks, we attended counseling sessions, and Sarah seemed genuinely committed to repairing our relationship. But I knew better. Trust was shattered, and no amount of therapy could fix it. I was just biding my time, gathering more evidence, and ensuring my revenge was thorough and complete. One day, during a particularly intense session, the therapist asked us to share our deepest fears and vulnerabilities. Sarah opened up about her guilt and fear of losing me, tears streaming down her face. I listened, nodding sympathetically, but my mind was elsewhere. When it was my turn, I looked directly at Sarah. My biggest fear is being betrayed again. I don't think I could handle it. She nodded, her eyes filled with remorse. I promise, Alex, I'll never hurt you again. I hope so, I said quietly. Because if you do, there will be consequences. The therapist raised an eyebrow, sensing the underlying tension. Alex, what do you mean by consequences? I smiled slightly, my eyes never leaving Sarah S. Just that trust once broken is hard to rebuild, and if it's broken again, it might be impossible. Sarah looked down, clearly unsettled by my words. The therapist made a note, probably sensing that our problems ran deeper than simple infidelity. But I didn't care. I had made my point. As we left the session, Sarah reached for my hand. Thank you for trying, Alex. I really want us to work. I squeezed her hand, giving her a reassuring smile. Me too, Sarah. Me too. But deep down, I knew the end game was approaching. Sarah might think she was winning me back, but I was already planning my final move. And when the time came, she would have no idea what hit her. The weeks dragged on, filled with therapy sessions and Sarah's continuous efforts to prove her loyalty. I played my part well, acting like a husband slowly healing from betrayal, but behind the facade I was preparing for the final act of my revenge. Mark had left town just as I instructed. I kept tabs on him through a private investigator, ensuring he stayed far away. His departure had further isolated Sarah, making her cling to me even more. She was desperate to make amends, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. One evening, Sarah suggested we host a small dinner party for our close friends. She thought it would be a good way to show everyone that we were working things out. I agreed, seeing it as the perfect opportunity to set my final plan in motion. The night of the dinner party arrived, and our house was filled with the chatter and laughter of friends. Sarah was the perfect hostess, smiling and engaging with everyone, while I observed from the sidelines, my mind racing with anticipation. As the evening wore on, I made my way to the kitchen to refresh the drinks. Sarah followed me, her face glowing with happiness. "Isn't this great?" she said, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Everyone is so happy to see us doing well." I forced a smile, kissing her forehead. "Yes, it is wonderful." She beamed, giving me a quick kiss before heading back to our guests. I watched her go, my resolve hardening. It was time. I slipped a small vial from my pocket, carefully pouring its contents into Sarah's glass of wine. It was a mild sedative, enough to make her feel drowsy and disoriented, but not enough to harm her. I needed her to be out of the way for what came next. Returning to the living room, I handed Sarah her drink, making sure she took a generous sip. Within minutes, I could see the effects taking hold. She started to sway slightly, her eyes struggling to stay open. "Alex," she murmured, "I don't feel so well. I think I need to lie down." I nodded, feigning concern. "Of course, honey, let me help you." I guided her upstairs to our bedroom, laying her gently on the bed. She mumbled something incoherent before her eyes fluttered shut. I watched her for a moment, ensuring she was fully asleep before heading back downstairs. With Sarah out of the way, I approached our guests, adopting a somber expression. "Sorry, everyone," I announced. "Sarah is not feeling well. I'm going to have to cut the evening short." Our friends expressed their concern but quickly made their way out, offering their best wishes for Sarah's recovery. Once the last guest had left, I locked the door and made my way to the study. I opened my laptop and accessed the hidden camera footage. I had been meticulously recording Sarah's interactions for weeks, compiling a damning collection of evidence. It was time to put it to use. I sent an anonymous email to our close friends, attaching select clips that highlighted Sarah's deceit and infidelity. The email was carefully crafted to paint me as the victim, a husband struggling to forgive his unfaithful wife. With that done, I turned my attention to Sarah's phone. Using the software Jack had installed, I accessed her messages and social media accounts. I crafted a series of desperate apologetic messages from her, confessing to the affair and begging for forgiveness. These messages would add another layer to the story I was building. The next morning, Sarah woke up groggy and disoriented. She stumbled downstairs, finding me sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, acting as if nothing had happened. "Morning," I said, smiling. "How are you feeling?" She rubbed her temples, wincing. "I feel awful. What happened last night?" "You weren't feeling well," I replied. "I took you upstairs to rest." "Don't worry. Our friends understood." She nodded slowly, still looking confused. "Thank you, Alex. I am sorry I ruined the evening." "You didn't ruin anything," I assured her. "Just take it easy today." She gave me a grateful smile, unaware of the chaos about to unfold. Later that day, the fallout began. Our friends started calling, expressing shock and concern over the emails they had received. Sarah was bewildered, denying everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. The messages, the videos, it was too much for anyone to ignore. Our social circle turned against her, and she became increasingly isolated. At home, I maintained a facade of support, but I knew she sensed the shift in my demeanor. The trust was gone, replaced by a cold, calculated determination. One evening, as Sarah sat on the couch staring blankly at the TV, I decided it was time to deliver the final blow. "Sarah," I said, sitting down next to her, "we need to talk." She turned to me, her eyes red from crying. "What is it, Alex? I can do this anymore," I said quietly. "The betrayal, the lies, it is too much. I think we need to separate." Her face crumpled, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "No, Alex, please. We can fix this. We can go back to therapy. Try harder. Please don't believe me." I shook my head, my expression resolute. "It's too late, Sarah. You broke my trust, and I can to get it back. I have already spoken to a lawyer. You'll be served with divorce papers tomorrow." She sobbed, pleading with me, but I remained firm. The plan had been executed flawlessly, and there was no turning back now. As I walked out of the house, leaving Sarah to her despair, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. The revenge I had meticulously planned was complete. Mark was gone, Sarah was ruined, and I was free. But as I drove away, a nagging thought crept into my mind. Had I really won, or had I lost something far more valuable in my quest for vengeance? Part 6. The Aftermath. As I settled into my new life, the weight of my actions began to bear down on me. Sarah had moved out, leaving our once-shared home empty and cold. The satisfaction I felt from exacting my revenge was fading, replaced by a hollow sense of loneliness. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into projects, staying late at the office to avoid going back to the empty house. My colleagues noticed the change, but I brushed off their concerns with excuses about being busy. One evening, as I was finishing up a report, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Curiosity piqued. I opened it. "Alex," it asked Mark. "I need to talk to you, please. Meet me at the park tomorrow at noon. It's important." My first instinct was to ignore it. Mark had been out of my life for weeks, and I had no desire to see him again. But something in his message sounded desperate, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. The next day, I found myself at the park, sitting on a bench and waiting for Mark. He arrived a few minutes later, looking disheveled and anxious. He sat down next to me, his eyes darting around as if expecting someone to jump out at him. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "What do you want, Mark?" I asked, keeping my tone cold. "I need your help," he replied, looking at me with pleading eyes. "Things have gotten out of control. The gambling debts, the rumors you started at us all spiraling. I can get a job, I can pay my debts, I am in serious trouble." I felt a flicker of pity quickly squashed by my anger. "You brought this on yourself, Mark. You betrayed me, and now you are facing the consequences." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "I messed up, and I'm sorry, but I'm begging you, Alex, please help me. I don't know what else to do." I stared at him, weighing my options. Helping him was the last thing I wanted to do, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing him so broken. Maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to use this to my advantage. "I'll help you," I said finally. "But on one condition, you need to come clean about everything, admit to everyone what you did and why you did it." He looked at me, stunned. "You want me to admit to the affair to everyone?" "Yes," I replied firmly. "You need to take responsibility for your actions. Only then will I consider helping you." Mark nodded slowly, defeated. "All right, I'll do it." I left the park feeling a twisted sense of victory. This wasn't just about helping Mark, it was about ensuring he never crossed me again. He would be humiliated, his reputation destroyed even further, and I would hold all the power. The next few days were a whirlwind. Mark followed through on his promise, sending out emails and making phone calls to our friends and colleagues. He confessed to the affair, painting himself as the villain and absolving Sarah of any blame. The response was swift and brutal. People who had once pitted him now turned their backs completely. With his confession in hand, I made a few calls of my own. I reached out to some contacts, pulling strings to get Mark a low-level job that would keep him afloat, but far from any real success. It was a lifeline, but just barely. Meanwhile, Sarah was struggling to rebuild her life. She had moved into a small apartment and was trying to find a new job. The scandal had made things difficult for her, and I knew she was facing an uphill battle. Despite everything, part of me still cared for her. I watched from a distance, ensuring she was okay, but keeping my involvement hidden. One evening, as I sat in my empty house, my phone buzzed with another text. This time it was from Sarah. "Alex, can we talk? I know things are complicated, but I miss you. I miss us." I stared at the message, torn. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue down the path I had chosen. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the good times, wanted to see her, to find out if there was any way to salvage what we had lost. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. We chose a quiet cafe away from prying eyes. When I arrived, she was already there looking nervous and unsure. "Hi, Alex," she said softly, giving me a tentative smile. "Hi, Sarah," I replied, sitting down across from her. For a moment, we just looked at each other, the weight of everything that had happened hanging between us. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. "I am so sorry, Alex, for everything. I never meant to hurt you." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I know, Sarah, but you did, and it's going to take a long time for me to get over it." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know I miss you. I miss us. Do you think there's any way we can try to fix this?" I looked at her, seeing the genuine remorse and longing in her eyes. Part of me wanted to say yes, to try and rebuild what we had lost. But another part of me knew that the trust was gone and it might never come back. "I don't know, Sarah," I said honestly. "I think we both need time to heal, to figure out who we are without each other. Maybe someday we can try again. But not now." She nodded, wiping away a tear. "I understand. Thank you for meeting me." We sat in silence for a while longer, then parted ways. As I walked back to my car, I felt a sense of closure. The revenge, the anger, it had all led to this moment. I had won, but at what cost? The months that followed were a time of reflection and rebuilding. I focused on myself, reconnecting with friends and finding new hobbies. Sarah and I stayed in touch, but from a distance, giving each other the space we needed. One day, as I was packing up the last of Sarah's things to send to her new apartment, I found an old photo album. Flipping through the pages, I saw the happy memories we had shared, the love that had once defined our relationship. It hurt, but it also reminded me of the good times of the person I had been before the betrayal. In the end, I realized that revenge had not brought me the satisfaction I had hoped for. It had only deepened the wounds and prolonged the pain. But through it all, I had learned valuable lessons about forgiveness, trust, and the importance of moving forward. As I closed the album and placed it in the box, I felt a sense of peace. The past was behind me, and the future was mine to shape. It was time to let go of the anger and embrace the possibilities ahead, and so I did. Life after the chaos of revenge was surprisingly quiet. With Mark gone and Sarah trying to rebuild her life, I found myself with a lot of time to think. The hollow victory left me feeling empty, but it also gave me a chance to reflect on who I was and who I wanted to become. I spent more time with friends, rekindling relationships I had neglected during the turmoil. Jack, the tech genius who had helped me hack Sarah's phone, was a great support. We often met up for drinks or weekend hikes, and he never judged me for what I had done. Instead, he listened, offering advice when I needed it, and silence when I didn't tea. One evening, as we sat in a quiet bar, Jack brought up something that had been on my mind for a while. "Have you thought about therapy?" he asked, his voice gentle but probing. I sighed, swirling my drink. "Yeah, I've thought about it, but I don't know if it'll help. I've been through so much and I don't even know where to start. Jack nodded, understanding. I get it, but it might be worth a try. You've been through a lot, and talking to someone who asked Train to help could make a difference. I looked at him, considering his words. Jack had always been practical and level-headed, and I knew he had my best interests at heart. Maybe you're right. I'll think about it. A few days later, I took the plunge and scheduled an appointment with a therapist. The first session was awkward, with me fumbling to explain my convoluted tale of betrayal and revenge, but the therapist, Dr. Roberts, was patient and understanding, guiding me through my tangled emotions. Over the weeks, I began to open up more, exploring the anger and hurt that had driven me to such extremes. Dr. Roberts helped me see that while my actions had been fueled by justifiable pain, they had also caused more harm than healing. She encouraged me to find healthier ways to cope and to rebuild my life with a focus on positivity and growth. Meanwhile, I continued to keep tabs on Sarah, not in a creepy or controlling way, but out of genuine concern. She was doing her best to move on, finding a new job and slowly piecing her life back together. We exchanged occasional texts, keeping our interactions civil and supportive. One weekend, I decided to visit my parents. It had been a while since I de-seamed them, and I needed the comfort of home. As I drove through the familiar streets of my hometown, I felt a sense of nostalgia and longing. I parked in front of my childhood home, the sight of the old house bringing a smile to my face. "Alex!" my mom exclaimed as she opened the door, pulling me into a tight hug. "It's so good to see you." "Hey, Mom," I said, hugging her back. "I missed you." We spent the weekend catching up, reminiscing about old times and enjoying home-cooked meals. It was exactly what I needed. My parents, always supportive, listened without judgment as I told them about everything that had happened. "I am proud of you, Alex," my dad said one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. "You have been through a lot, but you're handling it with grace. Just remember to take care of yourself." "Thanks, Dad," I replied, feeling a warmth in my chest. "I am trying. It's not easy, but I'm getting there." As I drove back home, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I needed to focus on the future, on building a life that was fulfilling and meaningful. Revenge had been a distraction, a way to avoid dealing with my pain, but now it was time to move forward. Over the next few months, I made significant changes in my life. I continued therapy, gradually finding peace and clarity. I also took up new hobbies, like photography and cooking, which helped me channel my energy into something creative and positive. One day, while browsing a local bookstore, I bumped into an old friend from college, Laura. We hadn't seen each other in years, and it was a pleasant surprise to catch up. "Alex, it's so good to see you," she said, giving me a warm hug. "How have you been?" "I've been better, but I'm getting there," I replied, smiling. "How about you?" We spent the afternoon reminiscing about our college days and sharing stories about our lives since then. Laura had always been kind-hearted and genuine, and it felt good to reconnect with someone who knew me before all the chaos. As we parted ways, she gave me a hopeful smile. "We should do this again sometime. It was really nice catching up." "Definitely," I agreed. I did love that. Over the next few weeks, Laura and I started hanging out more often. We went to coffee shops, explored local art galleries, and even took a weekend trip to the mountains. Her presence was a breath of fresh air, and I found myself looking forward to our time together. One evening, as we sat on a park bench watching the sunset, Laura turned to me, her expression thoughtful. "Alex, I've really enjoyed spending time with you," she said softly. "I know you've been through a lot, and I just want you to know that I am here for you, no matter what." I looked at her, feeling a surge of gratitude and affection. "Thanks, Laura. You've been amazing. I don't know what I would have done without you." She smiled, reaching for my hand. "You are stronger than you think, Alex, and you are not alone." As we sat there hand in hand, I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for a brighter future. The past had shaped me, but it didn't. To you have to define me. With the support of friends like Laura and the lessons I had learned, I was ready to move forward one step at a time. With Laura as support and the progress I was making in therapy, I began to feel like my old self again. The weight of the past was lifting, and for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely happy. Laura and I grew closer, and what started as a rekindled friendship was blossoming into something more. One evening, Laura and I were having dinner at my place. We had just finished a delicious meal and were sitting on the couch enjoying a glass of wine. The conversation flowed easily, but there was a question that had been lingering in my mind for a while. "Laura," I began taking a sip of my wine, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said, looking at me with those kind, understanding eyes. "Why did you never reach out after college? I mean, we were so close and then we just drifted apart. I've always wondered what happened." She sighed, setting her glass down on the coffee table. "Honestly, Alex, life just got in the way. I moved to a new city for a job, got caught up in the daily grind, and before I knew it, years had passed. I've thought about you often, though. You were always a good friend." I nodded, understanding. "I get it. Life has a way of pulling people in different directions. I'm just glad we reconnected." "Me too," she said, smiling. "And speaking of reconnecting, how are things with Sarah? Have you two been in touch?" The mention of Sarah brought a pang of mixed emotions. "We have exchanged a few messages here and there. She's doing okay, I guess. Trying to rebuild her life." Laura reached out and took my hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "That's good to hear. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive her?" I thought about it for a moment. The anger and hurt I had felt slowly giving way to a sense of acceptance. "I don't know, it's as complicated, but I am working on it. Therapy has helped a lot. I've realized that holding on to that anger is only hurting me." She nodded, her eyes filled with empathy. "Forgiveness is a process, Alex. It takes time. Just keep focusing on your healing." Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of my phone buzzing on the table. I glanced at the screen and saw Sarah's name. Hesitating for a moment, I picked up the call. "Hello? Alex. Hi." Sarah's voice sounded hesitant. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "No, it is fine. What is up?" "I wanted to talk to you about something important. Can we meet tomorrow?" "There is something I need to say in person." I glanced at Laura, who gave me an encouraging nod. "Sure, Sarah, let's meet at the coffee shop on Main Street at noon." "Thank you, Alex. I'll see you tomorrow." As I hung up, Laura looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. What did she want? She wants to talk. In person. "I'm not sure what it is about, but I guess I'll find out tomorrow." "Are you okay with that?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Yeah, I think so. It's time to get some closure." The next day I arrived at the coffee shop a few minutes early, feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation. Sarah walked in shortly after, looking more composed than I had seen her in months. "Hi, Alex," she said, giving me a tentative smile. "Hi, Sarah. Have a seat." We ordered our drinks, and then there was a moment of awkward silence before Sarah spoke. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her voice steady, about everything that happened and about us. "I know I hurt you deeply, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I am truly sorry." I nodded, appreciating her honesty. "I know, Sarah, and I'm sorry too. For everything that I did in retaliation, it was wrong, and it didn't make anything better." She looked relieved, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. "Thank you for saying that. I've been trying to move forward, but it's been hard. I miss what we had, Alex, but I understand if you don't feel the same." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I miss it too, Sarah, but we can go back. Too much has happened. I think we both need to focus on our own healing." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I understand. I just wanted to say goodbye properly." To have some closure, I reached across the table and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Goodbye, Sarah. I hope you find happiness. Goodbye, Alex. I hope you do too." As she left the coffee shop, I felt a sense of relief. The chapter with Sarah was finally closed, and I could truly focus on the future. That evening, I met Laura for dinner, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. We talked about our day, shared stories, and laughed together. As the night wore on, I realized how much she meant to me. "Laura," I said, looking into her eyes, "I'm really glad we reconnected. You've been such a positive force in my life." She smiled, reaching across the table to take my hand. "I'm glad too, Alex. You've become a long way, and I'm proud of you." I squeezed her hand, feeling a surge of affection. "I think I'm ready to move forward to really start a new chapter." "Me too," she said softly. "Let us do it together." And so we did. With Laura by my side, I felt hopeful for the future. The past had been painful, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about resilience, forgiveness, and the power of love. As we walked hand in hand through the night, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. With Sarah out of my life and Laura becoming an increasingly important part of it, I felt like I was truly starting over. The process of healing wasn't easy, but it was necessary, and with each passing day, I felt a little bit more like myself. Laura and I continued to grow closer, our relationship deepening with each shared experience. We went on weekend trips, explored new hobbies, and spent countless evenings talking about everything and nothing. Her presence was a constant source of comfort and joy, and I found myself falling for her more and more. One sunny afternoon, we decided to take a hike up a nearby mountain. The trail was challenging, but the views were breathtaking, and it was the perfect opportunity to disconnect from the chaos of daily life. As we reached the summit, we stood together, looking out over the expansive landscape. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. "This is beautiful," Laura said, her voice filled with awe. "It is," I agreed, taking her hand, "and it is even better with you here." She smiled, squeezing my hand. "I feel the same way, Alex. I'm so glad we found each other again." I turned to her, feeling a surge of emotion. "Laura, I know we've both been through a lot, but I feel like we've come out stronger on the other side. I love you and I want to build a future with you." Her eyes filled with tears and she smiled, a mix of happiness and relief. "I love you too, Alex, more than I ever thought possible, and I want that future with you." We kissed, the world around us fading away. In that moment, everything felt right. The past was behind us, and the future was full of possibilities. As we made our way back down the mountain, we talked about our dreams and plans. We both wanted to travel, to explore new places and experience new things. We also talked about the possibility of moving in together, taking our relationship to the next level. A few months later, we found a cozy apartment in the city. It was a fresh start for both of us, a place where we could build new memories and create a life together. Moving in was a whirlwind of packing boxes, assembling furniture, and figuring out how to merge our lives. One evening, after a long day of unpacking, we sat on the couch surrounded by half-empty boxes in a cluttered living room. Despite the mess, I felt a sense of contentment. "This place is starting to feel like home," Laura said, leaning against me. "It is," I agreed, wrapping my arm around her. "I am really happy, Laura. I've never felt this way before." "Me neither," she said, looking up at me with a smile. "And I can't wait to see what the future holds." As we settled into our new life together, I found myself reflecting on how far I had come. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer defined me. With Laura's love and support, I had found a way to move forward, to embrace the future with hope and optimism. One weekend, we decided to visit my parents. It had been a while since they'd seen me, and I wanted them to meet Laura. We drove to my childhood home, the familiar sights and sounds bringing back a flood of memories. "Alex, it's so good to see you," my mom exclaimed as she opened the door, pulling me into a tight hug. "It's good to see you too, Mom," I said, hugging her back. "I want you to meet someone." Laura stepped forward, a little nervous but smiling. "Hi, I am Laura. It's nice to meet you." My mom's face lit up with a warm smile. "Laura, it is so nice to finally meet you. Alex has told us so much about you." My dad came to the door, shaking Laura's hand. "Welcome to our home, Laura. Any friend of Alex's is a friend of ours." We spent the weekend catching up, sharing stories and enjoying home-cooked meals. My parents were thrilled to see me happy again, and they immediately took to Laura, treating her like part of the family. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, my mom brought out an old photo album. We flipped through the pages, laughing at the memories and sharing stories from my childhood. "Alex, you've come a long way," my dad said, his voice filled with pride. "We're so proud of you, and we're happy to see you moving forward." "Thanks, Dad," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "I couldn't have done it without your support, and without Laura." Laura smiled, taking my hand. "We all need a little help sometimes. I'm just glad I could be there for you." As we drove back to our apartment, I felt a sense of gratitude for the journey I had been on. It hadn't been easy, but it had led me to a place of peace and happiness. A few weeks later, as we sat on our balcony watching the city lights twinkle below, I turned to Laura. "Laura, there's something I've been wanting to ask you," I said, my heart pounding. She looked at me, curiosity and affection in her eyes. "What is it, Alex?" I took a deep breath, reaching into my pocket and pulling out a small velvet box. Opening it, I revealed a beautiful ring, the diamonds catching the light. "Laura, you've been my rock, my support, and my love. I can imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, a radiant smile spreading across her face. "Yes, Alex, yes, I'll marry you." I slipped the ring onto her finger and we kissed, the city lights sparkling around us. It was a moment of pure joy, a testament to the power of love and resilience. As we planned our future together, I knew that the past had shaped us, but it didn't define us. We were ready to create a new story, one filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities, and this time I knew that nothing could tear us apart. The months leading up to our wedding were filled with excitement and anticipation. Laura and I threw ourselves into planning every detail, from the venue to the guest list, and we enjoyed every minute of it. Our friends and family were incredibly supportive, and it felt like we were surrounded by love and positivity. On the day of our wedding, the sun was shining and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. We chose a beautiful garden venue filled with blooming flowers and the gentle sound of a nearby stream. It was the perfect setting for our special day. As I stood at the altar waiting for Laura, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at how far I had come. The pain and betrayal of the past seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by the happiness and love that filled my life now. The music started, and I looked up to see Laura walking down the aisle. She looked stunning in her white dress, her smile radiant, and her eyes shining with tears of joy. My heart swelled with love as she approached, and I couldn't believe how lucky I was to have found her. When she reached the altar, we took each other as hands, and the officiant began the ceremony. We exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through thick and thin. As we slipped the rings onto each other's fingers, I felt a deep sense of commitment and joy. "You may now kiss the bride," the officiant said with a smile. I leaned in, kissing Laura softly as our friends and family cheered. It was a moment of pure happiness, and I knew that this was the start of our forever. The reception was a blur of laughter, dancing, and heartfelt speeches. Jack, my best man, gave a touching speech about our friendship and how happy he was to see me find love again. Laura S., maid of honor, her childhood friend Emma, spoke about Laura S.'s strength and kindness and how she had always believed in true love. As the night went on, Laura and I found a quiet moment to ourselves. We stood on the edge of the dance floor, watching our guests enjoy the celebration. "This is perfect," Laura said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "I couldn't have asked for a better day." "It really is," I agreed, wrapping my arm around her. "I am so grateful for you, Laura. You have brought so much joy and love into my life, and you've done the same for me, Alex," she said, looking up at me with a smile. "I can await to see what the future holds for us." That night, as we drove to our honeymoon destination, a cozy cabin in the mountains, I felt a sense of peace and contentment that I hadn't felt in a long time. The journey to get here had been filled with challenges and heartbreak, but it had also led me to the love of my life. The honeymoon was magical. We spent our days exploring the beautiful landscape, hiking through the mountains and relaxing by the fire at night. It was the perfect start to our new life together, and it gave us time to reflect on our journey and look forward to the future. One evening, as we sat on the porch of our cabin watching the stars, Laura turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Alex, I've been thinking," she said softly. "I know we've both been through a lot, but I believe that everything happens for a reason. Every challenge, every heartbreak, it all led us to this moment." I nodded, taking her hand. "I agree. It's been a tough road, but I wouldn't change a thing. It's made us stronger and brought us closer together." She smiled, squeezing my hand. "And I think it's time for us to focus on building our future, maybe even starting a family." My heart skipped a beat at her words. "You mean," she nodded, her eyes shining with excitement. "Yes, Alex, I want to start a family with you. I want to build a life filled with love, joy, and happiness." Tears filled my eyes as I pulled her into a hug. I want that too, Laura. More than anything, the rest of our honeymoon was filled with dreams and plans for the future. We talked about the kind of home we wanted, the adventures we wanted to have, and the family we hoped to build. It was a time of hope and anticipation, and it brought us even closer together. When we returned home, we settled into our new life with excitement and determination. We found a charming house in a quiet neighborhood, perfect for raising a family. We spent weekends decorating, gardening, and making the house our own. A few months later, Laura surprised me with the news that she was pregnant. The joy and excitement we felt were indescribable. We celebrated with our friends and family, and it felt like everything was finally falling into place. As the months passed, we prepared for the arrival of our baby. We decorated the nursery, attended prenatal classes, and read every parenting book we could find. It was a time of anticipation and excitement, and we couldn't wait to meet our little one. The day finally came, and we welcomed a beautiful baby girl into the world. Holding her in my arms for the first time, I felt a profound sense of love and gratitude. This was the culmination of our journey, the start of a new chapter filled with love and happiness. Laura and I named her Grace, and she quickly became the center of our world. Every day was an adventure, filled with laughter, joy, and the occasional sleepless night. But through it all, we were a team, supporting each other and cherishing every moment. As I stood in the nursery one evening watching Grace sleep, I reflected on the incredible journey that had brought us here. The pain and betrayal of the past seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by the love and happiness that filled our lives now. Laura walked in, wrapping her arms around me and resting her head on my shoulder. "She is perfect," she whispered. "She is," I agreed, feeling a sense of completeness, "and so are you." We stood there together, watching our daughter sleep, and I knew that we had finally found our happily ever after. The past had shaped us, but it didn't define us. With love, resilience, and hope, we had built a future filled with endless possibilities, and I couldn't wait to see where our journey would take us next.